Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this afternoon game drive here in the 3.5 million hectare Greater Limpopo Transfrontier Park. What you are seeing there, and why I'm speaking a little more subduedly than I sometimes do, was two Nyala bulls doing a little dance, and we're going to move a little bit closer to them just now and see if they won't do it again for us. We're sitting on a little game reserve called Djuma in the middle of that huge expanse of wildlife land, and you're with Wild Earth on the afternoon safari. If you would like to contribute to anything during this game drive, be it questions, comments, anything you have to say, suggestions, please do so on Twitter, hashtag Safari Live, or email us at questions@WildEarthTV. Like I said this morning, written post not likely to reach us. South African Postal Service been on strike for the last 9 months. On camera today we have Andrew. He has covered his face rather like a bandit, so I'm slightly afraid every time I turn round. Great news is that Wendy is seemingly up and running, and Brent and Phil will be there. And in the control room we have Tara, running everything on her own this afternoon. That's because Eugene, the genius, has taken a well-deserved rest and is probably onto his third beer by now. Well done, Eugene. Our plan this afternoon, once we've looked at these rather magnificent Nyala, is to head to the east of the reserve and just see if there aren't any lion tracks that have crossed in. I have a slight desire to see some elephants this afternoon, so I'm hoping that that's what we'll be able to do, perhaps at one of the water holes. But for the moment, welcome. Lovely to have you on board. My name is James, by the way, in case you were wondering. And if you're a new viewer, you're especially welcome, and you're especially asked to send us your comments and your questions. Hashtag Safari Live or questions@wildearth.tv. Right, I'm just going to sneak very gently forward, and we're going to have a look at these Nyala, which are now doing their dance. Now, this slightly bizarre behavior is I haven't seen in any other antelope species. And what they are, I'm sure you can, the one on the left-hand side, you can basically see the huge white flash of the tail, and you can see both of them have got the hair on the back of their backs standing upright. And they're walking with this ridiculously slow gait, sort of almost like a dressage pony in slow motion. And what they're doing is displaying to each other, trying to show each other how big they are. And the reason for this is that they can avoid fighting. If one of them decides, no, well, he's a better dancer than I am, then they can avoid sort of injury and settle any territorial and dominance disputes without physical contact, which is ideal. It's the only antelope species that I know of that does something quite as astonishing as this. The other one is just standing there with his hairs all stuck up and his tail flicked up. They're totally aware of each other. And walking almost in complete silence. And off in the drainage line, beyond the one on your right, there are a few females. There's also a little water hole to our right-hand side, which we're going to go towards just now. There seem to be some females and a little calf. Isn't that a fascinating thing to see? And I wouldn't exactly call it a break dance, but it's certainly unusual in the animal kingdom. Right, I'm just going to pop over to the water hole here and see if we can't find the calf and the baby that I saw earlier. Yes, there are some there. We'll just pop up onto the wall and see if we can't get a view. Okay, Andrew. I think they're going to leave the water's edge. So we're going to stop here. And that will be part of a sort of loose arrangement of cows that will normally stay together but might split up. There's a young male third from the front, well, excluding the tiny one. A very sweet little calf. And it's a balmy 21 degrees Celsius or 70 degrees Fahrenheit, which for midwinter is pretty good, I'd say. I'm sitting here in shirt sleeves. There's no accounting for Andrew's dress sense this afternoon, but it's got nothing to do with the weather. Right. So as they disappear behind this little leadwood tree, we're going to carry on and make our way to the east, to the slightly more familiar territory, to the stuff we were knocking about in this afternoon. Hello Shanae, welcome on the afternoon drive. Nice to have you with us. First question of the afternoon drive, you'd like to know, do Nyala do that display all year round? The answer is yes. I've seen them certainly doing it, possibly not so much in the early rainy season, but I've seen them doing it now, midwinter. I've definitely seen them doing it in January, so probably most of the year round, yes. Quite unusual. It's probably not so much a mating display as a territorial or dominance display. Donna in South Carolina, because this is the second question of the day, I'm going to adhere to your request. Andrew is now extremely excited. Donna would like to know if I can display like a Nyala. I'm going to give it my best shot, only because it's still quite warm and the animals are probably not moving a great deal. So Donna, this is for you. Andrew will mark me out of 10. In fact, you can all mark me out of 10. So you'll just have to pretend that I've got hair on the back of my back, and what the Nyala does is he walks like this. And he looks out of the side of his head like that and carries on. There you go, Donna. What do you think, Andrew?
8.5 out of 10.
8.5. That's pretty generous from Andrew, I have to tell you. He's not easy to please. Right. Plug myself back in before another game drive comes along and takes me for a fool. Donna, I hope you enjoyed that. Right, so we're now on the southern boundary, and I'm hoping against hope that the Styx pride, which we saw around this area a little while back, I'm hoping against hope that they will have crossed back onto Djuma. I know there weren't any tracks this morning. Brent did check, but maybe during the course of a relatively cool day they might have come across. Hello, Rudy. Thank you for your question. It's a nice one. I quite enjoy this sort of question. You want to know how much rain is normal in the area, first of all, and secondly, let me just stop here and explain it instead of jiggling about on this road. Rudy, the average rainfall is about 350 to 400 millimeters, 450 to 500 millimeters of rain, which in inches, if I'm going to tax my brain quite horribly, is probably about, say, 18 inches of rain a year. Yeah, that's about right. And sort of at the outside maximum. The concept of an average rainfall, especially in most parts of Africa, is actually a bit of a kind of misconception. So we do, of course, you can work out an average from anything, but the average, it tends to fluctuate so hugely that to say we get 450 to 500 in a year is not necessarily true. So we'd go through very pronounced dry periods and very pronounced wet periods in a far less predictable manner than seems to happen in places like the Mediterranean, where the climate seems to be a lot more predictable. So here, Rudy, I think to date this year we've had 300 millimeters, which for this rainy season is very low, and the rainy season's over now. But the new rainy season will start in sort of early summer. Now, a lot of people start to think about rain in September because that's when our spring begins. And the clouds build in the Drakensberg and they promise rain and they thunder and they lightning, and then in October they come over this side and they do the same thing and they promise us all sorts of things like politicians, and then they don't deliver, again, much like politicians. And often what happens is the first rains only come in November. And interestingly, that's when the impala have learnt, and a lot of the other animals have learnt, to drop their lambs. So I think that late November is probably the most normal time, if you can have such a thing out here, for the first rains to happen. Could be earlier, but often sort of early November, late November, around then. Nice question. Thanks, Rudy. Right, so we have some feedback for my little dance there. Yvonne, thank you for your kind mark of 10 out of 10. Rocky Fella, whoever you are, gave me 1 out of 10. I'd like you to come out here and do better. Diane, an 8.5, agrees with Andrew. I think that's fairly fair. And Donna, you think Andrew should try next time. I think that's a brilliant idea. He's shaking his head vigorously. Of course, if we put the pressure on, he will have to do it. So if we have a very quiet drive, we'll get him to do it for us. Thank you, Mr. Rocky Fella. Right, we're now at the far southeastern boundary. No lion tracks as yet. So we're going to head north. Chuckster in Florida. You've got a question about drainage lines. Thank you very much for that. You want to know sort of basically how they function and where they flow and that sort of thing. Some of the water holes are in fact dammed drainage lines, but basically when we say drainage line we mean a stream. But because of the amount of rainfall here, those streams very seldom flow unless we have very high rainfall. Then they do flow a little bit. I suspect in a sort of bygone era when there was probably much more rain in the area, that's probably what formed the drainage lines. I can't imagine with the amount of rain we have now that the drainage lines would have formed as they are. And so they do flow into some of the water holes, yes, when we dam them. But otherwise they were largely tributaries of a big river about 3 kilometers to the south of here called the Sand River, which in turn is a tributary of the Sabi, which in turn will flow into the Crocodile, which in turn I think eventually flows into the sea somewhere around Maputo. Then just to keep you updated on Wendy is still being a recalcitrant old bag. She's not in fact functioning too well. This is driving Brent into apoplexia and hauling Eugene from his rests, but I hope we'll get her up and running fairly soon. Not easy to fix things out here in the middle of nowhere, but we'll hopefully be lucky. Andrew, do you see the Steenbok there? I'm not sure we'll get him, but we'll try. That's it, Andrew's got him. Sorry, I've put him behind a bush. Let me go a little bit forward. They do tend to run away. He's being okay. You got him there?
Yeah.
Quite a nice picture there of a little Steenbok ram. Steenbok. Steen means stone. Now just watch him carefully. What he's doing there is marking territory. He's got little glands between his hooves, as far as I understand. will help him to mark territory. And then the other thing Steenbok do, of course, is bury their dung within their territories, which is a very unusual behavior. You very seldom get to see a Steenbok like this. They normally just either stand still for 2 seconds, and then as soon as they think you've seen them, they rush off at high speed. And he'll have a little mate somewhere around here. They stay in visual contact, but they won't stay particularly close to each other. She'll be watching from somewhere close by. He's not sure if we've seen him or not. You can see him half-heartedly marking his territory like that. I've never seen them do that. That's really nice to see. Now he's even having a little bite to eat. This may well be the best Steenbok sighting I've ever had. Oh, there, he's gone. Can you still see him there, Andrew?
Yeah.
What you'll find is there is a gentle southeasterly breeze, and he would have picked up our scent and probably gave him a bit of a fright just exactly as he lifted his head there now. And the southeast is coming from just behind us. I'm just going to let him see if he doesn't come out onto the road. He might. It's so seldom we get to look at them like this for any length of time. A Steenbok is what we call a concentrate feeder, so this leads into quite a long discussion. I'll give you the short version to begin with, and then you can ask some questions if you'd like to. Basically, the smaller you are, the higher your mass-specific metabolic rate. So basically what that means is the more energy each kilogram of you will use. So each kilogram of elephant uses less energy than each kilogram of Steenbok. Now, what that means is that you need to eat a lot more energy concentrated food if you're little like a Steenbok, and so you'll eat things like roots, very concentrated or rich green leaves, maybe the odd seed. You'll probably find that they pick up the odd insect as well, and that keeps their metabolism going. Whereas an elephant doesn't have to do that. They need more bulk than they do the concentrated stuff, and so they'll eat it in a far more less selective manner. This is a very selective feeder. The buffalo is another great example of a sort of bulk grazer, which is not too selective over the kinds of food that it eats. Right, I think we'll hie our way along here. We're going towards Buffelshoek waterhole, hoping perhaps that there might be a bevy of elephants having a small drink there. And if there aren't, well, I've no doubt my lonely friend the hippopotamus will be there on his own. There goes the Steenbok, darting off. Just astonishing the speed at which something that little can move. Hello, Dennis in Massachusetts. Welcome to the afternoon game drive. Nice question that. You want to know are Nyala and Impala found year-round here? I'm sort of assuming that you are asking if there's any sort of migration that takes place in this area. The answer is that they are found all year round. Impala are not a migratory species, so they will stay wherever there is a fixed water. And the same with the Nyala, they need sort of less water than Impala, but they do need water, so they'll stay in a similar sort of area. The most numerous species around here is the Impala, as far as the antelope go, and that is largely because of the amount of water that there is in the area. The Greater Limpopo Transfrontier Park is a vast area, but in this particular sector, we're in the sort of western section of the Kruger National Park, and it's all private landowners here. And what a lot of private landowners have done, have pumped water on their reserves because they want animals present all the time. If you're running an ecotourism business, it's difficult to accept that animals should migrate away for 6 months of the year because you've got nothing to show your guests. So with the amount of water that there has been pumped in the area, Impala have thrived, as have zebra, whereas migratory species such as wildebeest or less water-dependent species like roan and sable have tended to dwindle in this area. Just a lovely, gentle afternoon light here in the bushveld. Hello, Kelly from White Bear Lake in Minnesota. That sounds like a freezing place to be, possibly only in the winter time. I hope it's a bit warm for you now. You want to know, when animals scent mark, can we smell? With the cats, absolutely we can smell it. Just like if a house cat marks or sprays, you'll be able to smell that. They tell me that a leopard marking smells like popcorn. I have not found that to be the case, but some people's noses are different from other people's noses. Then hyenas and certainly things like the viverids, which are the civets and the genets, or the mustelids like the badgers and the polecats, or even the, I'm looking for the mongoose, which are a separate family on their own. Even they will, they have fairly pungent odors, scents that they produce from an anal gland, which they tend to mark things with, and you definitely can smell that, especially the civet. The civet smells very strong. And hyena, I've smelled incredibly powerful and offensive hyena smells. But as far as the antelope go, I don't really know. Maybe wildebeest. I'll tell you what, the next time we find an impala midden or a wildebeest midden, we'll stop and have a smell, and I'll let you know. Thanks, Kelly. You spot something, Andrew?
No.
Andrew spotted an impala. He's very politely pretending he didn't so that I won't look like a fool. Ron from Scotland, I see you are trying to test me this afternoon. You are pushing the limits of my ecological knowledge. You want to know, what is the niche separation between steenbok and duiker? For those of you who don't know, and I'll show you a picture when we get to the dam perhaps, a duiker is a slightly larger antelope that lives in similar areas to steenbok, but not quite the same area. So, Ron, a duiker, which is a bit bigger, lives in thicker bush, normally around the drainage line areas, slightly bigger, and the steenbok tends to live in more open areas and certainly is more adapted to drier drier environments. They don't need to, they're not nearly as water dependent as duiker are. So duiker, while they don't need to drink every day probably, it will be more water dependent than steenbok, which tend to be totally water independent, which is quite a feat for an animal like that. But if you're a concentrate feeder, you can normally absorb a bit more water than some of the other animals. So I hope that answers your question, Ron. So in very broad strokes, a steenbok is separated by living in slightly drier areas, less water dependent, and a duiker will live in thicker bush on drainage lines, but otherwise fairly similar strategies. Thanks, Ron. Andrew's just going to quickly clean the lens. Hello, Charlie. You want to know about why Nyala seem to need less water. Nyala get a lot of water from their food, as you guessed correctly. They eat green leaves, they're browsers, and so there'll be quite a lot of water on in the food. If you are not water dependent like an impala, for example, if you are water dependent like an impala, and if there's enough water around, what it means is that you can pretty much eat anything and still survive. So although it seems like quite a good strategy to be independent of water, you have to search for food a lot more carefully if you are independent of water. There's always some advantage to one strategy and a disadvantage to another. And then there's another steenbok, and the environment will dictate as to whether or not. Sorry, Andrew's just trying to find a steenbok that I pointed at him. There it is. Sorry about that, Andrew. I do need to learn to warn Andrew a bit more effectively. There it's running off into the distance. Sorry about that. Safari on Twitter apparently also thinks that tiger, or probably smelled tiger urine, and apparently it also smells like buttered popcorn. I must say, Safari, I've never smelt a tiger's urine, but a leopard's to me doesn't smell like that. In fact, I'd be quite offended if I went to the movies and somebody handed me a box full of whatever that leopard urine smells like, but maybe tigers do. I'd love to see a tiger in the wild. That's on my wildlife bucket list. So you can see we're gaining height here. The northern, sort of northeastern section of the reserve is the highest point on the reserve. Hello Raisa, you'd like to see some spoor or tracks? If we find some interesting ones, definitely I'll stop and show you. I did see quite a nice zebra track going along the road, so we might try and have a look if he comes back onto the road. And the light is good for tracking, you're correct. Ginny, you ask an interesting question, but I'm not sure that I can answer it satisfactorily. I'm going to give it a go, though. You say, is it possible that the herbivores have a less smelly method of territory marking because of the chlorophyll in the food they eat? I'm going to say no, I don't think so, but that I think that they probably can't produce nearly as smelly a type of a substance because they don't eat meat. And I think that the number of toxins and smelly things in meat are far more than those in herbivores, and so I suspect that's probably why they don't smell as much. Might have something to do with the chlorophyll, but I don't think so. Very nice question, very nice thought. Nasty little road, this. A question from Chris about my travels to America and what my best wildlife sighting has been there. Chris, I have to admit that I haven't traveled to any of America's wildlife hotspots. Spent a little bit of time in Rocky Mountain National Park. I think we saw some elk. Watch out there. So I'm afraid I think elk would have to be the highlight of my American wildlife expeditions. But I really love to get to see some wolves and bears. They would be my the things I'd like to see the most. Going to look here that I can see something on the road up front. I suspect it's a deceptively shaped rock, termite mound or log, and it is a log. Right, sorry about that, Andrew. Yeah, there, oh, look at that. There's a waterbuck. That's a lovely waterbuck bull. Let's sneak a bit forward and get a view of him. Now, this is an animal that does smell. Smells very musky. They say that has to do with predator avoidance, but lions don't necessarily avoid killing waterbucks. Some impalas to the left, but let's stick on to the wasserbok. I'm not going to chase him, he's going to run away. He'll come out maybe into a bit of a clearing there. There we go. There he is. He's a big old bull, that. Not a particularly confiding individual. But we're not far from the water, so let's pop on to there and see where we're going. See what's come down to drink. And if I like to touch base with my lonely friend, the hippo there. It always makes me happy to see him, and I feel some sense of solidarity when I see him. Another waterbuck through there, Andrew, with the impala. Sorry about that. this. There we go. Beautiful shot of the... You'll find these... A waterbuck bull like this will hang around with the impala, mainly because it's obviously great for vigilance. So the impala are extremely good at seeing predators, and so a waterbuck bull like this will enjoy hanging around with a group of them, so that he doesn't have to look around so carefully. He can find something to eat. And you find single wildebeest bulls do exactly the same thing. And they don't compete with each other. They have sort of totally different trophic niches or feeding niches. I hope you can hear the sound of them moving through the bush. It's just a lovely sound. Right, let's carry on a little bit. If you do hear a slapping sound, that's me hitting my ear because the number of flies in the area has suddenly ramped up exponentially. Andrew very cleverly brings himself a little mouth and face cover, which makes him look like a bandit from the Old West, but probably is quite effective against the flies. He's nodding vigorously. Aged 6 in Dayton Children's Hospital. You want to know, and this is a very good question, what the yuckiest insect I've ever eaten by mistake is? Well, that is a very easy answer to give you, Keith. While eating dinner, and this happened more than once, one evening or a few evenings during the summertime, in this area we get a huge spray of these black, what we call stink bugs. And they're little black bugs that if you threaten them in any way release a disgusting smelling sort of toxin. And I've had it on numerous occasions where one of these bugs, no matter how careful I've been, has landed in my food, and I've put it in my mouth and bitten right into the disgusting stink bug. And I've then had to cover my mouth, leave the table, run away to the bathroom and spit everything out. Obviously you can't do that in front of your guests. Thank you, Keith. So the big thing to avoid out here in the summer is the black stink bug in your food. Yuck. Quite close to the water now. Hello Kathleen, a nice question again. Do we get wild berries in Africa? The answer is yes, we do. Not quite like you do in higher climes. I'm not sure that they can be truly described as berries. As far as I understand it, and I might be wrong here, the strict definition of a berry would be a sort of winter agglomeration of fruits that I think they come in the winter time. But basically we don't have those, but we do have fruits that certainly resemble berries. The guarri bush is the most obvious one, and it produces quite a delicious little, it looks like a sort of miniature blackberry. In the summertime. Doesn't taste particularly delicious. At least the pip doesn't taste particularly delicious. But that's the most obvious one. And then we get the whiteberry bush, which produces, these are all summer fruits, produces a delicious tasting whiteberry. It's like a sweet pea, it's quite nice. What other berries do we get? Those are the sort of most berry-like fruits that we find here. Buffalo down here. So can you just try and spot them so we can have our little moment of discovery there? Can you see them there? Can you see them, Andrew? Right across the other side of the dam. Andrew's just going to show you what I saw. Well done. Quite a nice shot. So the reason I stop here and don't just drive up there and sort of show them to you is that when you're walking through the bush, especially when you're walking on foot, it's very important that you maintain what we call 360-degree awareness. So you need to be looking around you all the time. It's not necessarily dangerous, but you don't want to surprise an animal like that, especially if he's sleeping next to the water, because he might feel threatened and bash you, which you don't want to be bashed by a buffalo. Very unpleasant. So I'm just showing you there the kinds of things that we try and keep a lookout for if we were on foot, especially in the bush. We'll try and get a bit closer around there. Nice shot, Andrew. Oh, and my lonely friend, the hippopotamus, is still there, alone. Poor fellow. Nothing but smelly old buffalo to keep him company. Rudy, you ask an interesting question, and I'm just going to stop here and I'll tell you a little bit of a story behind it. Side of the tree, Andrew. How's that? It's not going to work for you, is it? There you go. Sorry. Poor old Andrew has to deal with me. It's not easy for him. There we go. So let's see off some buffalo, and then Andrew will show you my lonely friend, the hippopotamus. Rudy, your question is, when I go away for a while, when I come back, do my spotting senses need some fine tuning or honing? The answer is yes, they do to a certain extent, but it was quite interesting to me. A few years ago, I was living in Johannesburg at the time, teaching the guitar, which is another story in itself. But I was asked to take a walk up in the northern Kruger National Park at a place called Pafuri, and I was quite nervous of this, and I redid my rifle training tests and my first aid. Oh, look at that! You get that? Bad luck. Very unpredictable event there. The hippo just had a yawn, just as Andrew went off him. Anyway, and I was worried about that I wouldn't be able to pick up the animals the same way that I used to. And it was funny how easily it came back, Rudy. I think it's just, once you learn it, I'd hesitate to use the cliche like riding a bicycle, but there is a certain element of that where your senses or your natural instinct to look around and be vigilant and look under each bush and in each tree certainly does seem to come back pretty easily. So very peaceful scene here. Very sort of, we haven't got the anticipation of the dusk just yet. Hello, Patty in Michigan. There seems to be quite a large attempt there to stump me with very difficult and excellent questions. You want to know about prion diseases such as mad cow disease, and do we get it in this area? Patty, as far as I'm aware, and I may be wrong here, mad cow disease has never come to the Kruger Park. There have certainly been episodes of foot and mouth that we have to be extremely careful of when they get into the domestic stock outside the reserve. They can affect the wild stock too, like these buffalo especially. As far as I know, mad cow disease hasn't been here, and I really couldn't tell you, I'm afraid, if it would affect a wild buffalo like this. The major diseases here, of course, are corridor disease and bovine tuberculosis, which apparently affects these buffalo, but they don't seem to be, I mean, certainly numbers of buffalo haven't been adversely affected by TB. They may just be sort of fairly banal carriers of it. There don't seem to be a great deal of elephants streaming down to this waterhole. So I don't think we'll spend too much longer here. But to say to that hippo, we saw a whole lot of hippo, not to the hippo, about the hippo. We saw a whole lot of hippo this morning at Arathusa and a much larger dam. Nicer grazing areas around it for hippo, a bit more vegetation in the water to give them some shade. And so I suspect, as I have said before, that this is a young bull who is in need of just sort of spending some time getting big and strong, and he will then probably go and try and take a territory eventually. Otherwise he's going to spend a very lonely life here in this waterhole. So, Lynn in New Hampshire, you asked about why this poor hippopotamus is on his own. I think that's pretty much why. I would guess that he's a young bull who's been tossed out of a little pod by a dominant bull, and he's come and, he's sort of seeking refuge here until he's big enough to take his own territory. The other possibility, and I've never seen him out of the water, so I couldn't tell you this. I'm just going to have a quick look with my powerful binoculars. The other possibility is that he's an old bull who's been tossed out of a pod and is living out the end of his days here in this waterhole. But I don't think that that's the case. Poor old boy. I'd like to come and check on him once a day at least, see if he's found a friend. Let him know someone cares, Right, so very peaceful afternoon. Very strong sense of that lovely African wilderness peace that we get. That's the main reason I live out here, for this and the smells and the sounds. And so I think we'll press on gently from here. Pamela, you'd like to know if bovine tuberculosis can in fact infect human beings. No, not as far as I know. Bovine tuberculosis only affects these sorts of animals, or bovids. and some of the cats, of course. But I think as far as we're concerned, we're pretty safe from it. Not the same as our TB. Okay, here we go. John Boy, a lovely suggestion that we call this hippo the Bachelor of Biffle's Hook. I think we might just do that. Right, we're going to head down southerly direction again towards the Umlulwane drainage line. If we do lose signal, it will be brief, and then Jiga will, unlike her friend Wendy, his friend Wendy, will come back. Hi Charlie again. I think it's again, unless you're a different Charlie. You want to know about TB in lions or other cats? Yes, it definitely does affect the cats. And they do pick it up from the buffalo. We're not entirely sure as to what effect that has on population numbers. It probably weakens the lions. It probably means they don't live quite as long, but there was a great fear many years back that the TB was going to wipe the lions out. And that certainly hasn't happened. As far as I know, lion numbers in the Kruger Park are not that adversely affected by it. But certainly they do get it, and I think possibly, especially, a bit like with human beings, if you're immune compromised, or if a lion is immune compromised, or is perhaps, very hungry, or a lot of heat stress, or territorial fights, then I think a disease like the TB will probably affect them far more than if they were healthy and strong and well fed. Hello, Jimalin on email. Thank you for your email. We do appreciate the emails and the tweets. And for those of you who posted questions, sorry about that. You want to know, and it's quite an interesting question, you want to know, what about those, you say you've seen pictures or videos of people in game parks with animals sitting on the bonnet. I know the sorts of things you're looking at. This doesn't happen in a place like the Kruger. Normally, where you've seen those sorts of pictures, it's probably been a cheetah on the bonnet of a vehicle in somewhere like the Masai Mara or the Serengeti, where the vehicle is often the only high point that they can get to. So normally they'd sit on a termite mound and survey the landscape, but the vehicle provides a very nice sort of substitute. In truly wild areas, that's the only time I've seen it happening. I've certainly never heard of it happening in the Kruger National Park, where animals are generally pretty fearful of cars. They will walk past them, but they don't jump onto them. I've had one incident where a leopard has jumped onto my car, but that was a totally abhorrent sort of situation where it was being threatened by a wild dog, and that's why it did it. And it certainly didn't approach the people in the back of the car, jumped off the car again. So I hope that answers your question. Don't seem to be able to start the car. There we go. We wouldn't have had a huge amount to talk about in this little area. Hello, Susan in the Netherlands, also on the email, questions@wildearth.tv, and also Benjamin. I'm going to answer your questions in parallel. Susan, you want to know, are there enough hippos here to prevent inbreeding? Remember that we're only operating on about 1,500 hectares of land, which is not huge. And there are dams or water holes around with larger pods, like the one we saw this morning, where there were about 10 hippos. But they're all part of a much larger population that will concentrate in the rivers mainly, or the water holes closer to the rivers, near the Sand River. And yeah, there are plenty of hippopotamus around to prevent inbreeding. And one of the ways that inbreeding is prevented is by young bulls being excluded from the pods where they were born, so that they don't breed with their sisters or their mothers. And they then go and have to find another pod of unrelated females. And Benjamin, like most animals out here, when they leave the herd, it's just as they sort of hit puberty, as they go through adolescence, they start to behave in a way that is sort of unacceptable. So in that way, they are very like human children. Human beings 100 years ago, when they turned 18, were pretty much expected to be independent. These days, our parents, thankfully, are a lot more tolerant of us, and we can hang about for a bit longer. But absolutely, there's a very similar situation where once adolescence has occurred, and boys start to exert themselves. So, I mean, you get that sort of teenage phase in boys where they turn 15 or 16 or 17, and they become quite boisterous. They start testing themselves, and they start testing their strength, they start testing against authority. And it's exactly the same in the animal kingdom, especially with elephants and especially with hippo. That's a lovely question, Benjamin. I haven't actually thought of it like that before. It seems that Wendy, I'm afraid, is still in a state of recalcitrant sulk. So for the moment, you're stuck with me. Andrew has spotted something. I'm just going to... What have you seen, Andrew? Oh, some dwarf mongoose. Oh, brilliant. Well spotted. Okay, while I take this next question, I'm just going to let Andrew focus in on the termite mound there and hope that those dwarf mongoose pop their heads out. Lots of questions of while Andrew just waits for those dwarf mongoose. They'll become comfortable with us there, then they're starting to pop their heads up. That's wonderful. Great spot, Andrew. Asking about the Styx Pride and whether or not we've heard or seen them or in the last few days. Last update was that they killed a wildebeest on the reserve south of us, Cheetah Plains. And then I think they've been knocking about on Chitwa and possibly around Nkoro, which is all sort of part of the same sort of area. And that's where they are at the moment. They haven't crossed back onto Djuma, and that's what I was hoping to find as we were driving along the southern boundary this afternoon. Now these dwarf mongoose, as I said the other day, have a fairly sort of a Gallic lifestyle. So they are they don't like to work too hard. They like to take it easy. They get up when the sun is well up, and only when it's shining on their little termite mound, so that they can bathe in the sun and groom themselves. Then they go off for a leisurely breakfast, followed by a fairly leisurely lunch, which then leads into tea and some supper, before they head back down the mound by sunset. So they're all now returning home and just lurking about there until the sun sets, and then they'll go back inside. And there's a drongo flying close by. I'm not going to attempt to get Andrew to shine on him because he'll disappear. But they like to follow the dwarf mongoose, as do the hornbills, and they act as a sort of early warning system for each other. You've got a picture there, Andrew. They're popping in and out.
I think they've all run off.
Okay, they've all disappeared. So we'll carry on along this road. On we go. We drove into a hole, made Andrew quite upset. Sorry about that. So, now that our elephant plan has failed at Buffelshoek, I think what we'll try and do is head down towards is kind of the other end of the reserve, but we're going to do it anyway, towards Treehouse Dam, and see what we can find that in, but we'll hopefully find some delights on the way. Andrew, what chances of tracking that batalier there? Yeah, I'm going to really test Andrew here. There's a lovely sighting of a female batalier, and if she stays in the sort of clear sky she's in now, we'll get quite a nice view of her, I hope. She's in there somewhere, probably a bit up. Sorry, I'm really testing Andrew quite badly here. It's not an easy thing to do. Can you see her?
Oh, there we go.
Okay, and he's got it. Look at that. That's brilliant. Well done. Okay, so quickly, you can see purely white underneath the wings there, as she disappears, and that means she's a female. The males have got a half black stripe underneath the wings there. Oh, come on, turn round. After all that. You can also see from that little cameo that we got from her that she was doing that sort of rocking flight. So they're renowned for doing a sort of rocking flight because the tail is so short, and so they're very unstable when they fly. Had it, touch wood, and hopefully won't ever get it. Some people have had it quite often in the area. So if you do live permanently in an area like this, normally what we do is we just spray ourselves with mosquito repellent come the come the summertime, in the summer evenings, and then in the winter time we don't really worry too much because there aren't many mosquitoes around. The major things to worry about with malaria are there lots of people around? Because remember that the malaria parasite has got to have two hosts, and that's the mosquito and the people, so it doesn't occur without both in the same area. So on these game reserves, it tends to be fairly uncommon, but outside of the reserves in the villages, it's much more prevalent. But certainly not as bad as in some areas like Zambia, northern Zambia, where it can be a bit worse. Hello, Wendy in St. Petersburg in Florida. Nice question. Do lions ever eat vegetation or fruits? They certainly eat grass to line their stomachs if they're not feeling so well, just like a domestic cat would. Do they eat fruit? I've never seen a lion eat fruit, but it's possible they might, and they might, especially in desert areas, they may well bite into something called a Djuma melon, which is a fairly bitter and foul tasting fruit, but it's got quite a lot of water in it. So a desert adapted lion may eat something like that in order to get moisture. Hello, Debbie in Lakewood, New Jersey. You want to know about the Styx Pride again. You said that you thought there were more than 2 females in the Pride. As far as I'm aware, there are. As far as I'm aware, there are at least 5. I have never seen the other 3. But you thought maybe some of them had been killed. It'd be great if some of the viewers could tell me. I don't know of any that have been killed. But if anybody has other information, it'd be great to hear from you. Thank you. Remember, hashtag Safari Live if you've just joined us, or questions at WildEarthTV if you're on the email. And we love to hear from you, and I especially love to learn information from those of you who've been virtually driving around this reserve for much longer than I have. Still looking for some tracks, hoping that we might be able to find some that the camera can pick up. Nothing here, I'm afraid. And if you see one, please shout. Alright. And I'll happily stop. If you see something that you think the camera will pick up. Hello, Joanne from Arizona. Nice bird question here. You want to know, do we get the African stone chat in this area? Because your field guide says that we should, and you've never heard them here. The answer is, in this general vicinity, yes. On Djuma, probably not. They need more open areas with little rocky outcrops. They tend to occur on what we call gabbro soils, or soils derived from gabbro rocks. So further in the south of the reserve, yes, I've seen them, and possibly in the Manuleti just north of us as well. But on Djuma, probably not. That's the African stone chat. I'll just find a little picture for those of you who don't know what he looks like. Showing my things, obviously some immense skill being able to drive and do this at the same time and knock Andrew's head off. Never a guarantee, that one though. Oh, wrong page. And at the chats. Hang on, let me stop and do this. African stone chat. There he is. Okay, so he's number 2. Andrew, is that sun in your way? How's that?
That's good.
Can you get in there? He's number 2 there. That's the male, and the female slightly less colourful. And it says here, usually in pairs in a wide variety of open grassland habitats, near marshes, flays, dams, streams, roadsides, perching on some low scrub, blah, 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 blah. But the most important thing there is in open grasslands. And as you can see here, not a lot of those around. But there are, in the Sabi Sands, there are some open grasslands, and that is indeed where I have seen them here. There are some tracks of a leopard further the other side of the reserve. I'm going to start moving a little bit faster and just see if we can't go and help some of the other rangers track the leopard there. Ooh, sorry, not a leopard, but some nyalas. If you can hear that crunching noise. They're eating something that's crunching. Odd. I think it's probably the pods. There's a scraggly sort of knobthorn bush where they're eating, and I suspect it's the pods from that knobthorn tree. No, it's not. No, that's incredible. Did you get that, Andrew? I don't know if you managed to get it. Try and pick up the bull there. He's chewing a piece of tortoise carapace. Obviously a tortoise has died there and been smashed up, and they're eating the shell. That is absolutely amazing. I wonder if you can hear that noise. So I can only think they're doing that for the calcium that it provides. The soil here apparently is fairly calcium poor. And so perhaps they know that they're a little bit nutrient deficient. Isn't that amazing? And I mean, they're not just picking it up and playing it with it, they're eating and swallowing it. That calcium, of course, will be crucial for bone development. It probably goes into their hair and their fur, definitely their horns. And their hooves, of course, as well. That really is truly spectacular to see. I'd love to know if anybody has seen that before. Look at them salivating away at the delicious nature of that tortoise shell. While we watch this rather stunning Nyala sighting, the bad news is that Wendy has gone into a deep sulk and will not be joining us this afternoon. So it's just me, I'm afraid. And Andrew, of course. Let's not forget Andrew. Really is really special to see. Even a little one. Hearing a squirrel alarm calling off to the right-hand side there. But it's a fairly half-hearted alarm call. Look at the way the sun shines through his ears there. And the sound of the crunching of it is just amazing. Right, well, let us leave these nyalas to their tortoise shell and make our way into the glory of the setting sun. Andrew and I have made something of a speciality of finding great sunsets, so we'll try and do the same again today.